Welcome to Wrong Time Watch. My name is Kevin, and today we're looking at the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto. This one has the date. They offer it with a date, without date, and also the Khaki King, which has the date and the date, but this is the Khaki Field Auto. And as you can see, hopefully you can see here, you can tell this has the brown dial. I have the Khaki King Auto with the black dial. And I like the look of this brown dial. I like the look of the vintage, the fake patina loom, fotina loom, whatever you want to call it. It looks good. Only complaint is I wish that date window was color matched or not present on the watch at all. I prefer no date watches. This watch was lent in. It's actually for sale. So if you're interested in purchasing this watch, send me an email. MSRP for this watch is $745. And as I mentioned, this has the brown dial. Another complaint I do have about these watches is the domed sapphire crystal. I would prefer a flat crystal, or at least putting some AR on the underside of this. You do pick up quite a bit from the outside here. You can see it on the dial. If you actually look at the watch to tell the time, you can see your face reflecting back at you. But other than that, I really like this watch. It's a great shape. It wears comfortably on wrist. It does have pin and collar. I did not size this for my wrist since this watch is for sale. I didn't want to mess with it really. Screwed links, I probably would have sized it for my wrist, or split pins, but this does appear to have pin and collar. It's not a big deal to size pin and collar. I don't know. I just don't like messing with it. Okay, so we already mentioned the date wheel. This does have the Hamilton H10 movement, 80 hours of power reserve. It is hacking and hand winding. So hacking means when you pull the crown all the way out, the second hand stops. Hand winding, of course, means when you wind the crown here, you're increasing the power reserve, you're tightening the spring. This in here, 80 hours of power reserve is quite impressive. Your typical automatic watch, you get about 40 hours of power reserve. This guy here is about 40. In your typical Swiss 2824 movement is 40 hours of power reserve. Speaking of the 2824, this movement is based off of the ETA C07.611, which itself is based off of the 2824. So this movement is based off of the 2824 movement. Let's zoom in and take a look at it here. So one thing that's interesting about these movements is there's no adjustment here on the balance wheel. Typically there's a little needle that you can move around and it'll have a plus minus sign on there. Now this watch does not have that. I don't believe that any of the Powermatic movements have the adjustment there on the crown, on the balance wheel. Let's see, pull this crown all the way out. The balance wheel has stopped. I believe there are some, yeah, right there, that eccentric screw, or whatever you want to call it, that screw head right there. So that's how you adjust right there. That's how you adjust this movement, or the balance wheel. Right there, that guy. So let's push the crown back in. It starts moving again. So what that screw does is you can move it in or out. Farther out you move it, should slow it down, and the more towards the center, which should speed up the movement. And there you go. See, we have a signed rotor. We can read what's around the perimeter here or not. Swiss made. I believe that's the serial number. Water resistant to 10 bar or 145 psi. Hamilton is the only company I've seen that uses a psi rating. So since we're zoomed in, we'll look at the signed crown here. The watch case itself is all brushed. Just the bezel is polished. And then the center links of the bracelet are polished. So everything here is printed on. I have not looked at the loom yet. I'm assuming the Arabics are loomed only, and then the hands. let's see here, focus. There we go. So you do have the 24-hour scale around the inside of the dial, which is typical for a field watch, which this is. Okay, let's zoom back out here. Already talked about the water resistance, 100 meter. The dimensions of this watch, actually before the dimensions, let's talk about the bracelet. So we do have these negative end links. So the overall length lug to lug is your total lug to lug with the bracelet. Don't have to worry about a positive end link sticking out. And as I mentioned, we do have these polished center links. You know, I'm mixed on polished center links. I don't know. For this watch, I don't really like it. For a dress watch, I think it fits. But it does kind of, you know, match with the bezel here. It does not have drilled lugs. It is fairly thin. We do have that display case back as I showed you a moment ago. And the sides of the bracelet are polished. So we have solid end links, solid links, milled clasp. This portion here is stamped, but they usually are, actually that might be milled. Hard to say, but regardless, it is pretty thick metal. We do have 4 micro adjusts, and we have these dual pushers. I really like these types of clasps with just the dual pushers. You don't have to mess around with the safety clasps. This is plenty secure. I really don't see this ever really coming off your wrist unless you intend it to. The dual pushers here. The watch does feel a little bit heavy, but everything is solid on it, so that makes sense. Let's talk about the dimensions and then I'll get it on wrist. So lug to lug is 49.8. Case diameter 40 millimeter. The thickness on it 11.7. That's from the flat display case back to the top of the domed crystal. 20 millimeter lug width, and this does taper down. It only tapers down to 18. I'd like to see it taper down to 16, but it still seems to be a comfortable watch. I can't tell you totally how comfortable it is because I didn't size it for my wrist, but I don't see why it would not be comfortable. And that middle link does articulate. So it is a 3-link bracelet, but all of the links are independent from each other, so that will aid in comfort as well. I have other watches where that center link is just fixed, like this guy here, for example. I still need to do a video on this one, but these 3 pieces are all tied together. Oh, I should show you the dial on this. This is the Seiko speed timer. Let's see, it might have died on me. I might need to get this in the sun. Okay, maybe it didn't. Anyway, back to the topic at hand here. 7 millimeter signed crown. Again, that is a push-pull crown. No big deal. 100 meter water resistance is plenty fine, especially for a field watch. And sized for, I would say his wrist is probably about 7.5. I have a 6.5 inch wrist. But size for maybe a 7.5 inch wrist, it weighs in at 149 grams. So here it is on my 6.5 inch wrist. I think it would fit perfectly on my wrist. Yeah, I really like the look of that dial. I didn't think I would like a brown dial, but it looks nice. And these polished center links, as much as I wipe them off with a cloth, they just seem to attract fingerprints and smudges. So anyway, there we go. Let's zoom out a little bit and then we'll take a look at the lume. We'll compare this to my Seiko SKX. If you have not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. It just wears on wrist very nicely. Let me know what you guys think of the polished center links as well. Alright, let's pause the video and we'll take a look at the lume. Alright, so the Hamilton is obviously on the left, and my SKX 009 is on the right. Despite what you see on camera, the Arabics aren't all that bright. I can see them, but the lume on the SKX is, as you expect, quite a bit better than the Hamilton, but lume's not too bad on the Hamilton. I can clearly see the hands. The hour and minute hand, at least, the second hand is not loomed. At least not that I can see. No lume on that second hand. Alright, that will conclude this video presentation. As always, thank you for your time and thank you for watching.